Hello, my name is Kate Fursova. I'm a project manager by profession. I welcome you in this video recording, and I will share some thoughts about building a team, especially when you're not choosing one, but when you're given one. As project managers, we are always under pressure. Every project comes with a set of constraints. And as you might know, there is a so-called iron triangle in project management. That is a set of constraints that every project has. And that triangle includes three key dimensions. There is scope, there is budget, and there is time. There's also quality in the middle, struggling in between all of those. This triangle is always trying to balance itself. So the moment one of the dimensions starts dominating, the others have to adjust to keep it all together. But there is one important dimension that is often missed from this triangle, and that is resourcing. Because resources impact your scope, your time, your budget, your quality, you name it. For example, if you desperately need for the delivery, but you don't have that specialist on your team, your scope delivery is in trouble. Or if you engage a 1 in a million engineer, you might not have budget for anything else. Or if your team is entirely made of new starters, well, you can only pray for the project to be delivered on time. And here is the reality. As project managers, we often do not have the luxury of choice. When it comes to project teams and project resources and individual resources, we are often given people rather than choosing them. But that does not necessarily mean that we skip the team building entirely. And I would rather say the opposite. It actually means that we have a bigger challenge. Because choice gives us a sense of safety. For instance, if I have a choice, I choose someone who argues less, focuses on quality, respects the boundaries, and who is a team player. But often, I end up having the loudest voice in the room with a million opinions different from mine, someone with she'll be right attitude, someone teaching me how to do my job, or someone else who is just quietly doing their own thing in the corner. When we start projects, we do not start with a team. We start with individuals. And the goal of every project manager is to transform that group of strangers into a working mechanism, or essentially a true team. So today I want to introduce perhaps to something new, but you might already know this. I want to talk about the Tuckman's stages of team development, because every team goes through this. And those are 5 stages there: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Because next time you lead a group of strangers who need to become a team, you might not have the perfect people, or the perfect plan, or the perfect circumstances. But at least you will have a map to navigate through that. It all starts in forming. At the beginning, everything looks so fine. People are introduced, the kickoffs happen, everyone is so polite, everyone is so capable, so busy, but they are not connected in any meaningful ways. And actually, they represent parallel or separate work streams, because each person or each team is still doing their own thing. So to help you understand this theory better, I will talk from my personal experience perspective. Quite a few years ago, at one of the previous jobs, I joined information technologies industry for the first time, and I started my journey in public sector. So back in the day, I joined the project team as the project manager, and I was responsible for a technology work stream. Everyone was so excited. Everyone was so polite. We had vibrant opening ceremonies and fun introductions, fun icebreakers. And the first week was fully dedicated to planning. So we were slowly cruising those first few days of the project. On Monday, I thought I had a whole crew behind my back. I was so proud to be part of that team. But by Friday, I realized that I didn't have a team at all. As I was having a peer review of the plans that we put together with the team, my reviewer pointed out that some of the processes did not actually match the reality. Others did not align well across the different streams of work because every member of the newly established team had contributed individually without even thinking about the others. And some people even stepped beyond their immediate responsibilities. Others focused only on their own area and missed the dependencies around them. So after that peer review, I didn't even know who to approach to get it all sorted. It turned out that I had a group of brilliant individual minds, but definitely not a team. So according to Tuckman, at the forming stage, the leader needs to be more directive. You establish clear rules, you set expectations, you create as much predictability as possible. Because people need to understand the purpose, the structure, the roles, the communication channels, and the rules of engagement. Well, now I know that, but back in the day, I was facing a storm. Literally, I could feel the storm coming because after the first couple of weeks of cruising through initial planning, I entered a continuous mode of firefighting and conflict resolution. One of the first things that we had to get right during that project was a solution design. And I thought, well, these guys are not new to this. This is not their first rodeo. So surely they don't need me in every meeting and every call. That was quite naive because after a few days of this hands-off approach, a flood of angry messages and escalations hit my inbox. The architects could not get hold of the network engineers. The infrastructure engineers did not get the instructions from the architects. The vendor could not get on site because simply nobody could bother to grant them that access. From a peaceful start, it turned into chaos and honestly, a bit of circus. Now, imagine me, a new starter in IT with no clue how to calm down a group of adult engineers, how to get things back on track, and actually all that happening in the most critical and strategic projects at that time. I was trying to be diplomatic. I tried to split the teams to avoid the conflicts. I tried to work around the conflicts. I tried to accommodate everyone's feedback. I tried adjusting the plans. Basically, I was trying to make everyone happy, which was a very dangerous move because in the end, it does not make anyone happy. It just makes your project manager tired. So what I understand now is that while the leader does act as a facilitator and a mediator, you cannot avoid conflicts entirely. And actually, conflict is not always a sign that the team is broken, because sometimes it is a sign that the team is finally starting to interact. And according to Tuckman, storming is a natural stage of team formation. People challenge each other, they test boundaries, they question decisions, they compete for influence, they expose assumptions. And yes, it is quite uncomfortable, but hey, it is also necessary. So as a leader, your role is not to pretend the conflict does not exist. Your role instead is to create the conditions where this conflict can become useful. You encourage open dialogue. You enforce mutual respect. You bring the team back to their original purpose, to the original plan, to the ground rules that you set initially. You remind people that the problem is the problem, not each other. So again, that's good to know now. But back then, oh boy, I was that close to quitting my job. But then things started getting better and norming. So yeah, the next stage of the team formation is norming. And in my project back in the day, things literally started norming after a few weeks of absolute hell. People perhaps got used to each other and to different ways of working, and we adjusted to each other. Surprisingly, they started not only talking, but listening. And the conversations shifted from arguing and blaming to finally problem solving. We produced the design pack, we captured the necessary instructions, we onboarded the vendors, we agreed the plans and responsibilities for the second time, of course, because, well, apparently the first time was just a warm-up round. Slowly, those individuals started working as a team. They began respecting each other's work without actually being prompted to do so. They stopped waiting for instructions before making small decisions. And slowly, without anyone announcing it, coordination turned into collaboration. So during the norming stage, Tuckman recommends that the leader steps back from being too directive. As a leader, you foster autonomy. You encourage the team to take ownership of their work and the processes. You are there to provide support, to remove barriers, but you allow people to build confidence in each other. And so my mistake at that time was being hands-off too early, at the moment when the team still needed guidance. Because at forming and storming stages, the team need structure. They need clarity. They need someone to hold the room when things got messy. But once they reached norming, they actually need something different. They need trust. They need space. They need permission to simply own their work. And after forming, storming, and norming, there is this beautiful stage called performing. At this stage, the team got into the work cadence. So back to my example of the project, the work was flowing. We moved from the design into the actual build and integrations. We onboarded more teams because why not? And I realized that something actually changed. I finally had a team behind my back. I also had individual champions I could delegate some work to, which, if you ask a project manager, is quite a sentimental and emotional milestone. From a project manager's perspective, the role shifts again. So at the start, you translate literally everything to everyone. You explain the plan, you explain the people, you explain the dependencies, you explain why as soon as possible is not a date. Later, you're mostly removing the friction. And if things go well and your team survived the storming and norming, you eventually step out more than step in. At this stage, I was there to provide direction when needed, bring in the right inputs when asked, remove roadblocks when escalated, but also manage stakeholders and all that other noise and deal with the admin work that nobody is dreaming about when they think about leadership. But the team was navigating the work and critical decisions. They finally understood the dependencies and owned them. So, according to Tuckman, the leader's role during the performance stage is simply to empower the team completely. You shift to a delegation and mentoring style. You protect the team from outside distractions. You avoid micromanagement, of course. You trust the system that the team has built. While I was close at that time, I was still slightly traumatized from the storming phase, but I was definitely way happier. And by the time the project approached its final stage, I decided to leave my job. But I still had my own version of a journeying phase. Generally, as Tuckman says about the adjourning phase, that is the phase when the project ends and the team disbands. Team members may experience a mix of various feelings, such as accomplishment, relief, or disappointment and uncertainty as they transition to new work or new project. In my case, I was transitioning out. But I knew that the team had been through a lot in those few months together. So before I moved on, I arranged a project retrospective to capture the lessons learned. And every team member got a takeaway for their remaining work and future projects. And I obviously got my own lessons too. I reflected on the challenge of building a team I had never chosen. I reflected on how hard it is to turn a group of strangers into a self-organized team. Because look, you do not always get to choose the people, but you do influence whether they remain a group of strangers or become something that can actually deliver together. And hey, those teams, they're not built through the ideal processes. A team is built through the messy middle. Through the disagreements, through the moments when someone says, oh, that's not my job, and someone else has to ask, okay, but whose job it is then? That is where teams are actually formed. Not at kickoff, not in your plan, not in the resource schedule, but in the uncomfortable gap between assigned and aligned. So what can we take away from here, from this? Well, first things first, your leadership style has to change as the team changes. So at forming, you provide clarity. Your style has to be more direct, right? At storming, you create safety and alignment. At norming, you encourage ownership. At performing, you empower and protect your team. And finally, at adjourning, you help people reflect, learn, and carry something useful into their next adventure. And as for the rest of the learnings, obviously, a group of people is not necessarily a team. It's not automatically a team, right? You can put names on a project plan or resource sheets. You can invite everyone to the same meetings. You can give them the shared milestones or deadlines. That still does not mean they are working as a team. Then conflict is not always a failure. Storming can feel like chaos, trust me. But it is also where assumptions come to the surface. And it is the leader's job to not avoid the conflict, but to make it productive, respectful, and connected to the purpose. And finally, the team building is not a separate activity. It is not only those fun workshops or icebreakers or coffee catch-ups or personality quizzes and who knows what. The real team building happens in the work, in the way we make decisions, in the way we handle conflict, in the way we recover after things go wrong, in the way we shift from my part to our outcome. I hope you found this presentation useful. I'd be keen to hear some thoughts and feedback and perhaps learn about your personal experience about team building, especially when you are not choosing one, but when you're given one. Thank you very much for your time.